We have a guest joining here. Welcome, man. So today we'll have 5 teams going. Anne's been through this before. You got 15 minutes. Keep an eye on me and the clock. In terms of percent, tell us what you're doing and why. And we'll start with aviation, then Hermes, then soul rounded, then with inner matter and unveil. So, go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are Team Aviation, and this is our final project presentation. All team members are here. Our project instructors are Ruth Comley and Scott Stevens, and our faculty consultant was John Dessler. So the goal of our project was to create an interactive, augmented reality experience to spark children's interests in careers within aviation, particularly outside of piloting, which is what we commonly associate with this field. And to do so, we used the P-51 Mustang, which is a US World War II airplane, to guide our design process. So our experience is location-specific. It's meant to be used at the Center for Aviation Technology and Training, which is a museum exhibit and learning space that very recently opened in Wilkinsburg. And this center is meant to cater to a variety of guests with different backgrounds and ages. However, a very important portion of the visitors will be school groups, predominantly from African-American communities. Through playtesting, we narrowed down our target demographic to students from 3rd to 5th grade. Just because of their enthusiasm and curiosity to learn, we think that it matches our project goals very well. But also through playtesting, we determined that the experience might be suitable as well for students from 6th to 8th grade. So our client is Museum Lab from the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and is representing the team today. And they were the exhibit designers for the Center of Aviation. And they, in turn, worked with Hosanna House, who are the exhibit managers and the owners of the space. So from the start, Museum Lab asked us to use augmented reality and the P-51 Mustang so that visitors to the space could have a realistic approach to the airplane, even though there's not a real P-51 Mustang there. And Hosanna House, their mission is to foster education in underprivileged communities and to expose kids to career opportunities from a young age. Hence our goal to spark children's interests in aviation. So the exhibit space I've been talking about, here are a few images. And some things to point out is that Museum Lab acquired the license for the Black Wings exhibit from the Smithsonian. And this exhibit highlights the achievements of African Americans in aviation in the US. So that was an important aspect for us to tackle. As a part of this, there are several artifacts and information about the Tuskegee Airmen, which were important characters in the history of aviation. And there are also several interactive installations, including a flight simulator in the space. So our experience is not the only interactive piece, but it is the one that focuses the most on science and engineering behind aviation. So for context, our experience is guided by a character, a narrator. Her name is Charlie. She's an African-American teen. She's a great-grandchild of a Tuskegee Airman. And she has inherited his P-51 Mustang. But it's in need of restoration, and she can't restore it herself. So she has come to the Center of Aviation Technology and Training to find a team of experts to help her. And so the experience phrases the students as this team of experts that needs to help her out. And these are the materials that we designed. So as you can see, we have an app that we have installed in iPads. We also have a Morse code guide, a deck of cards that comes in a box, and a large poster size sorting and assembly guide, which is meant to be used throughout the experience. And now I'll pass on the mic to Ivy, and she'll talk about the first stage of the experience.
Okay, so after the group gets to know the narrator and her basic stories, they're guided by the narrator to sort the cards according to the colors on the physical poster. When they're sorting the cards, they'll find out that there are 2 different kinds of cards. The first kind is information cards, which includes basic knowledge about different forces in aviation and basic information about P-51 Mustang. The second kind is component card, which is just different parts on the airplane. And they will notice that for some parts, there are multiple cards, which will be used in a puzzle game afterwards. After they have sorted all the cards, the narrator will guide them to the puzzle games one by one. And they will use the information on the back of the cards to determine which component is the correct one for P51 Mustang. And for each puzzle, they will be guided with the cards they needed. Let's take the wing puzzle as an example. So here you can see these 4 cards are needed for a wing puzzle. And on those information cards, you can see that high lift can create high altitude, and P51 Mustang is a plane that flies at high altitude. So therefore, we need a wing that can create high lift, which is the tapered wings. After the team thinks that they found out the correct answer, they can click on the corresponding button on the iPad. If they click on the correct card, they can proceed to the next puzzle. And if they click on the wrong card, the narrator will help explain why this card is incorrect. And I'll invite Jimmy to talk about the following steps.
Thank you. Hi. So after the team solve all the puzzles, the game is going to change into the hunting stage. And in the hunting stage, we place AR markers around the environment. And we also designed a decipher game for the kids to play with a card we gave them. And you can see that on each card, there comes with a piece of Morse code. And using the Morse code guide, the team can decipher it to check that which English letter is the correct one. And we use this Morse code as an educational purpose to remind the children that it's communication usage in the world. And after the team decipher it, they have to find out where the marker hides in the exhibit space. So here's a video of. So after the team find out where the marker hides, they have to use the tablet to scan the marker, and an airplane component will show up. And you can use the icons on the right side to see the more details about the model. And we make the texture looks realistic and authentic so that the children learn more about it after they collect it. So here's some more examples. Next one. So once all the missing parts were collected, the game will jump into the assembly stage. And in this stage, the team are going to use the collected components they collect to build a P51 Mustang. So in the video, using the tapping gesture, the team can place each component onto an outlining spot to see whether it fits. And we also implement functions like changing the perspective and also rotating the airplane to that the team use throughout the experience. And after the airplane is complete, there will be a firework to celebrate the team's success. And next, I will invite Eric to talk about the flying scene.
Thank you, Jimmy. So in the last scene, the team will be flying the airplane they just built in augmented reality. You see in the picture, there's a long runway painted on the floor in the exhibit space, and the flight will start from there. Here's a video to show how it works. The first step is to scan the number 28 and place the airplane on the runway. Then you press the button, take off. The airplane will take off along a fixed trajectory. When it reaches to a certain height, you'll be able to control the direction by the control panel in the lower left corner, up, down, left, and right. And you'll also be able to add a rainbow trail along the trajectory. The airplane model is realistic, but the rainbow trail is a fantasy. Yeah. And another fun thing you can do is to take photos using the air camera. Like this, you take a picture, and you can share them with your friends. During our playtest, all kids enjoyed the flying experience, and you can tell from their smiling faces. And we hope that the good memories can help reinforce the learning experience. So that's the end of the experience. With that, I would pass to Xiaoying to talk about the stories behind the scene.
So throughout our project, we've had a few design challenges. The first one, which we knew at the beginning, is the limited amount of iPad we would have. So 3 to 5 kids would share one iPad. So in the beginning, we decided that the experience outside the iPad is equally important. So we put a lot of effort into designing an experience that would focus outside the iPad. So when we first started, we decided to do an asymmetrical game that uses different roles. So each kid will get a specific role and specific materials. However, we soon realized that this kind of gameplay is not very good for this age group because this age group tend to work better together. We realized that sometimes when they work separately in the beginning, they have trouble proceeding. So we soon decided to change our gameplay into a shared information game. We also switched from the manuals to the cards because airplane physics is very complex, and we kept adjusting the difficulty level to make sure that the information can be digested for this age group. And as you can see, the manuals have very dense information, so we decided to simplify it and also divide it into colorful cards so the kids can understand. We also had some technical difficulty with the design of the markers in the beginning. So we used AR Foundation. And in the beginning, the app was having difficulty identifying which model is for which marker. So 3 to 4 models would show up at once. We kept iterating until we find a marker design that would make sure the AR experience would go very smoothly and successfully. So there are a lot of lessons reinforced in this project. The first one is that fun educational content can be very difficult. How can we do something that the kids will enjoy but also learn from? And the second is that don't assume that you would know your target audience. We don't really remember what we were like when we were 9 years old. So we had to talk to all the kids in this demographic so that we would understand. Third is that playtesting is crucial. We kept iterating until that we can improve our project to the point that the kids will enjoy them. Third is pivoting can be life-saving. So it was very difficult for us to switch from the manuals to the cards because we put a lot of effort into making the manuals work. However, at some point we had to realize that it's not working anymore. So we decided to pivot, and that really saved our project. So these are our deliverables, including some physical pieces, as well as an app on the iPad. Also, an educator's guide and technical documents. And we would like to thank Kelly Johnson from Fox Tribal High School for being our voice actress and model, as well as our client, the Museum Lab, especially Ann, Toby, and Jeffrey for helping us out. And we also like to thank Hosanna House and Assemble for helping us playtest, and all of the ETC faculty and staff. So in summary, this is our experience overview. The kids will get together, sort the cards, find the correct components, decode the Morse code, find a marker in the space, and then assemble the airplane and fly the airplane. And that's all. Thank you. We're open for questions. No question.
What was your demographic again?
It's African American and 9 to 11 years old.
9 to 11. Okay. I actually think it's probably an enjoyable experience for younger and older children. Can you talk a little bit about what you might have done differently to change that demographic target?
So in terms of younger than that, we realized even though we narrowed down the information and separated into cards, made it a little bit more digestible, as Xiaoying was saying, they still, when we tried with younger than that, they still struggled a little bit with the bigger words, even just reading in itself. So that's why we were a little bit hesitant to make it younger than 3rd grade, which I guess is easier when we're talking about school groups to talk about the grades. Older than that, we did play tests, and they enjoyed it. So that's why we think that it could also be suitable particularly for middle schoolers. We tried with high schoolers, and they really enjoyed it, but we got comments like, oh, of course it's this wing. Oh, this is so easy in the information part. So it can still be enjoyable because it is still kind of a puzzle, not a game, but there is a sense of that. But at that age, then the information itself becomes a little bit too easy.
Yeah, and for a younger audience, I think the way that we design our experience is that you can't really fail. So you can choose every single option to make sure that you can proceed. So in the end, you can always reach the flying stage.
I wasn't in the scope of your project, so if you don't have an answer, fine. But did you guys get a chance to observe anybody after the experience and see if they were more interested in the aviation exhibits in the Tuskegee Airmen? Just thinking about engagement beyond your experience.
So just to repeat, the question was if people were talking, if there was a conversation afterwards about the exhibit and the Tuskegee Airmen. So we didn't actually test this out in the exhibit space. We didn't have access to that with playtesters. So we tested in a place, so Hosanna House, where the students have been shown the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. That same space has information on the walls, things like that. So they were very quickly associating our game with that. And there was a conversation about that. We also saw a lot of conversations about the building process and how it felt like Legos, or it was so interesting that this is how airplanes are made, which was also part of our goal. But as I said, we haven't actually seen it in the space.
I have one more.
Hi, so my name is Ann, and I'm from the Children's Museum and was their client. So to kind of pick up on that, I just wanted to put the project in a little bit of context. First of all, the group was terrific. We're so happy with the result.
Thank you.
But to kind of address your question, adjacent to this space or to this activity, there's also a hands-on makerspace immediately a part of the museum experience. So this AR experience and will be in context and in conjunction with hands-on making. Outside, there will be, they also have a program with drone flying, so they'll get to be flying drones for real. And then there's also a full flight simulation laboratory and training program for the high school kids that is also in this bigger complex. So this experience fit a perfect niche for that elementary school age, because then the younger kids are making with cardboard and paper, and then you can kind of step up into this, and then you can step up for the high school for the kids who are like, I really want to learn how to fly, I really want to be a mechanic. So this just fit perfectly, and aesthetically it fit in with the exhibition design that had already been done. So I appreciate that. And then also just context, the exhibit in the whole center, the grand opening is actually in June. So the team did really well in the context of the exhibit being installed, kind of open, some access, but not really. But yeah, we are so appreciative, and we're really excited to have this. And it'll be used this summer with summer camps in a couple of weeks. So
Thank you.
Hermes outside.
Oh, sorry, my bad. There we go. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are Team Hermes. We are Lena, Tanvi, Tao, myself, Mingkan, and Shanshan and Yiming. And we are under the advisement of Shirley Saldemarco and Tom Corbett. After briefly introducing our project, we will discuss some topics such as design, Softweeks, and results. For our project, we worked with Stefan Casper and the Global Language and Culture Room. There, they host a collection of experiences that center around topics such as multiculturalism, language learning, and identity. For our project, we were asked to support this collection of experience by making a new experience that was transformative and storytelling and centers around topics such as human-centric within the global spectrum and uses the technology within the Global Language and Culture Room. So at the top of our metrics matrix is storytelling and transformational content accuracy. And for our intended deliverable, we wanted to make an impactful story with that meaningful call to action that uses the technology in the room properly. However, we never got to that point at the end. We never got to that meaningful story with that great call to action. We still had a stable experience that used the technology in the room. So that leads us to ask the question, how did we get here? And that's where I will hand it off to Shanshan to start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. So at the beginning of the semester, we are in the brainstorming phase, and we start to think about anything that can touch deeper and raise people's awareness about the culture and identity. So we came up with 4 topics, including the river, study abroad, folktales, and the architectures. So also for the technology-wise, we are super excited to make use of full power of the global language that is both the HTC Vivo and also the immersion room. So after we brainstorming and we start to decide to pick up the river as our topic because it's very, it has a lot of the cultures and in the river, and also it has so much potentials in telling a good stories. So we also decide to create a local co-op game between a VR in the a player in the VR and a player in the immersion room. And we know it's very challenging because, but we are super excited about it. So in the quarters, we present our design and mechanism to the faculties, and we receive 2 primary feedbacks. The first is about the overcomplicating the design. Since our game, it has a lot of the interaction for players to interact and adapt. So it may distract the players from understanding about the content and the stories. And the second we receive is about the storytelling. This part is very good because the idea is in the co-op in the river is very exciting, and it also has so much potential to turning a good story. So after that, we decide to make some changes about design, and we start to implement it. So here is 3 goals for the hubs: the story, technology, and also some key features like rowing the boat and some matching the text and the video, and also the real-time map. So next, I will pass to Tao to talk about the design.
Thank you, Shanshan. I'm Tao, and I'll talk about design process, starting with halves. As Shanshan mentioned, we are making something that's asymmetric co-op experience, but for halves, we're narrowing down, and we wanted to focus on communication. And topic-wise, we're focusing on the environmental issues in the Amazon rainforest and the river, and the consequences of these environmental issues on the local indigenous people. So for story, now we're focusing on the story that these two players will be from a NGO who are making a documentary to help change policy and practices in regards to deforestation and pollution in the Amazon rainforest. And we also split them into 2 different roles. So first, there's the field agent, which is the VR player, who will be responsible for collecting footages from the Amazon River. And then there's the research agent, who will be in the immersion room using the 3-wall projection, and his job will be to archiving footages and give direction to the player in the VR. So game mechanic-wise, for the VR player, which is the field agent, he'll be rowing the river using 2 controllers as the paddles of the boat, and that's how he kind of navigates in the river. And then he'll be collecting footages on the river using the camera mechanism we had, and also he'll be responsible for communicate the content of the video clips he collects to the immersion room guest, which is the research agent. And then for the research agent, his job is to read files and archives about the Amazon rainforest and about pollution and deforestation problems. And then he'll be responsible for matching these kind of descriptions with the video clips in order to make that documentary in the end. And he'll be also using a map to help the VR guests navigate in the Amazon rainforest and the river. So playtest day-wise, we have this build that contains a finished game scene and all the basic functionalities. We were missing a full tutorial stage and a final scene and / call to action kind of offboarding experience for the user. And the map function was not finished by then. So the feedback and observations from that was that there are a lot of technical difficulties when we were doing the playtest. There were some bugs, and the map function missing definitely kind of hold the playtester back a little bit. And another big finding was the motion sickness in the VR component was really heavy because of our rowing mechanism. And then there was a lot of confusion in communication, especially when the players are strangers. So then we made some changes according to the feedback and observations we had. We took away the rowing mechanism because of the motion sickness. Now the players will be going on a planned route, and they will only have to be making the decision when they're at the forks. And this kind of leaves them a window for them for both the players to discuss what decision they want to make and communicate about some other things that they were experiencing. And we also took away a lot of the tabs from the immersion room UI, so in order to make it easier for the players to navigate and interact with screens. Yeah, and after that, I'll pass it to Yimin to talk about some other changes we made for Softweeks.
Yeah, thank you, Tao. In our Softweeks, with the help of our instructor, we have faculty to experience our games. And after that, we got a suggestion to pivot. Right now is the soft demo to soft demo video, and right now we will introduction our mechanism in the kind of room. At the beginning, we add an introduction video about our 2 agents. We also add a tutorial level to teach our 2 players how to play. For VR part, we get rid of the rolling mechanism, and it's not synchronous right now. The VR player will record the videos and then send it to the immersion room player. And the immersion room player will communicate with the VR player to match the pair and to get video pairs. They can also make a decision about their path based on the live map on the immersion room. In the end, they can reorder the video clips and to get a final documentary. After that, Min Khan will talk about our feedback and suggestion.
Thank you, Yimin. So many faculties have playtested our experiences and have provided us with some very insightful feedbacks. And one of the most important one is regard to storytelling and research. So the current design is players experience and discover those environmental issues in Amazon through collecting and recording videos in Amazon. But right now, the videos are merely just clips demonstrating the consequences of those environment issues, like oil pollution and deforestation. It feels surface level and does not bring the level of empathy and understanding to our expectations. So we want to touch something deeper that is regarding to the incapability of local governments, evil actions from those big companies, and also even the consumer habits that indirectly causing those issues, and we fail to connect to those bigger issues. And the second concern is that we kind of derailed from our transformational goal. So as I just talked about, we want players to feel, to understand, and to empathize with Amazon people. But right now, we focus too heavily on the gameplay elements, and the complexity of gameplay simply impeded the conversations about content and story. And lastly, there is a heavy concern with regard to the scoping. Just to recap, so we are building a local co-op game and a symmetric game between a VR player and an immersion room player. We have a lot of elements here, and we need a lot of iterations to support each one of those elements. And we simply did not support it with enough iterations to address concerns and feedbacks from those playtests, which leads to some usability and experience problems during the faculty's playtest. So based on those feedbacks and given the time that is left, we are advised to pivot away from this original design, which we believe as a team is definitely the correct idea. So we decided to make two main changes. The first one being removing VR. The second one is give our clients the ability to change content in the game. And I'll talk more in details about those two. So the first decision about removing VR, we want to put the VR content, which is a boat view, onto one of the 3 immersive walls. And that way, we remove the complexity of the VR interactions and to allow the player to focus more on the conversation about the story. And our second big decision is, since we are not touching deep enough and connect to the bigger issue with our videos, we want to give our client the ability to change and modify the content in the game with ease. So that's why we built this import automation tool. Our client can simply input a few links, start, end time, and description in a formatted CSV, and then in the backend, it's going to download, extract, and trim the videos. A Unity script will pick them up and read and load those videos into the game, and finally in the game, it will display the videos. But all the middle parts are hidden from the client, which means the client is able to change and update and modify the content of the game without even need to worry about development process at all after we leave. And this gives him a lot of freedom to create content that is meaningful and that is connects to a bigger issue. Lastly, I will pass it to Lena to talk about the results.
So our final deliverable is composed by the stable build and the documentation. The stable build is from the Softweeks result because it's stable and bug-free. And let's talk about the tech documentation. We included the basic configuration, both software and hardware, and basic troubleshooting like during the running and setting process. So the client could change or set or troubleshoot the software easily. And I'll pass to Tanvi to talk about what we have learned from this project.
Thank you, Lena. So to reiterate everything my teammates have spoken about, we admittedly started off the semester with a very ambitious design. And what was alarming was that when in week 13, a lot of these features not only were not working, but in the end, we failed to address the call to action in the end, which was supposed to be the core of our experience. And that brings us to the lessons that we learned this semester, first being timeline for iteration. What we did do was try to iterate individual features rather than iterate a start-to-end experience in order to iterate our whole design as a whole experience. And that is where the timeline for iteration should have shifted up many weeks before what we have done so far. Second being the communication with our client. We entered the semester with the misconception that our discussions with our client should be a product we present for feedback rather than discussions about the process and the roadblocks we're facing. And in the process, we also failed to use our client as a very valuable resource. The third one being the research that all of us put in collectively as a team for an experience that should have reached so much more depth. And what we failed to do was give that depth of experience because of our lack of individual research and owning the content. Fourth being the scope of our project. This doesn't only refer to the whole scope of the design, but also scoping the project according to our individual strengths and using that to our advantage. In summary, we started off the semester with the prompt of a storytelling transformative experience. We ended up with the builds at Soft that had a lot of gaping holes in our design, and we attempted to pivot, but had to revert back to that build with an added tool and documentation so our client could derive some usability out of our work this semester. It wasn't the ideal semester for any of us, but we do leave the semester with a lot of valuable lessons learned. Thank you for listening, and we are now open for questions.
Yes, Chris. So, thank you for being honest with us. I have a question about your early design process. And I know I'm going all the way back, but I'm curious why you chose the point of view of an outsider to the Amazon rather than the point of view of someone who lives in the Amazon. Can you talk about that decision a little bit? Yeah, so Chris's question was about our early design process and why we chose the perspective of an NGO who's primarily outside of the Amazon and not someone like within the Amazon. And this was actually a piece of advice that some professors gave to us in terms of storytelling. In reference back to the scope and using some of our core strengths, we come into this project not with a lot of storytelling experience or storytelling education formally. And so one of the pieces of advice we got was rather than creating our own story, just taking a story maybe from an indigenous point of view or a point of view and just adapting an experience around it. And I think in the research at the beginning, what had happened was we did look into a lot of different stories from Brazil, stories from Ecuador, from indigenous people coming in. And then what happened was we started to form this idea that we take in all these perspectives and maybe all these ideas, maybe all these certain situations, and maybe put it in through the perspective of a documentary and where someone is traveling through the Amazon and collecting all these stories. And what probably got lost was these core stories, and it more just came about the face value environmental issues such as deforestation and pollution. Yes, Dave.
You mentioned a few times that your end experience is going to be a call to action. I'm kind of curious, what was the call to action going to be?
Yeah, so Dave's question was about what our call to action was going to be. And our call to action, so with our target demographic, which is college students coming into the global language and culture room, typically students are brought in from classes and they use the experiences there to enhance their curriculum. And the idea for the call to action was to be educate these students on what they could do from their perspective. And we were hoping to maybe tie in this ultimate idea, or our client really wanted us to tie in this ultimate idea of Western civilization and their consumer habits, and tying in that to the overexploitation of natural resources within the Amazon. And so we would give them the opportunity to possibly learn how they could help out, or maybe just, at the very least, maybe get them to think about how they can take their consumer habits and change them so that maybe we can benefit maybe and lessen the overexploitation of natural resources within the Amazon.
All right, that's time.
Oh. Thank you.
come here, come here, come here. Good morning. We are Team Soul Rounded. We are creating an immersive and interactive exhibit at the Mattress Factory based on the works of artist Rennie Cox. Our team includes Hue, who's the programmer, Glendon, who's the designer and producer, Bella is the designer and artist, Nelson is the researcher and programmer, I am Anjali, I'm the producer, and Echo is the artist. Our projector instructors are Mo and Heather. Our client, artist Rennie Cox, is a photographer, an artist, a lecturer, and a political activist. Her works capture the beauties and identities that lie within her subjects. She is using human bodies, both nude and clothed, to celebrate Black womanhood and also deconstruct stereotypes. Our show is being curated by Jessica Moss, who is an artist, an independent curator, and an arts consultant. She runs her own arts consultancy, curates shows and performances. We will be exhibiting our work at the Mattress Factory, which is a contemporary arts museum located in Pittsburgh. Mattress Factory has pioneered the development of alternative art forms through site-specific installations, videos, and performance art. And now I'll invite Glendon to talk about our experience goals.
Thank you, Anjali. So our design goal is from the several meetings with our clients, and we want to build up an immersive and interactive experience within that space. Also, there is an interesting note from the artist is that she wants everyone act weirdly in that space and to be observed by others. So set that as a starting point, we design our design goals. So the first one is embodiment. By embodiment, we want to incorporate audience action and movements into the space and build up the kind of bridge into the artworks and the audience themselves. So as I showed here, by posing like the artworks, you can have a strong connection between yourselves and the artworks. And the second one is art space. By art space, it's not simply bring 2D artworks into the 3D space, but we also want to open up a space for our audience to move, act, and interact within that space, so that we can reach the augment effects, which we want to incorporate all the audience and artworks into the same space and make them as a whole piece. And I'll show to demo, give a brief introduction of our exhibitions. So this is the first part of the experience. And people are gonna control the tree man and the Pac-Man from the different sides. And after eating certain proportion of the tree man, the Pac-Man gonna spit out the tree man. And the tree man gonna escape to the next room.
Run. 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 I'm free. I'm free at last.
And the second room will be the projection mapping room.
The goddess, who does not require validation from anyone, is the most feared force on the planet.
Here we use K for demo, and later we're gonna cover the 5 walls, including the ceiling and the floor. So I'll get to touch a little bit about the installation design for the physical space. We're gonna use the 3rd floor of Annex Gallery at the Mattress Factory. And there will be 2 connected rooms. The first room will be the interaction room, which is divided by the semi-transparent film at the center of the room. With the semi-transparent film, people can see from both sides and they can interact with their different interaction segments respectively. And also we test several materials for the screen. Right now we are using the acrylic boards with a milky white film as the screen. And entering into the second room, there will be a bench against the wall, and the wall will have a piece of Renee's printing work. And we will cover the rest of the 5 walls. So I'll pass to Bella to talk more about the design details.
Thank you, Glendon. So Renee has been famous for her specialism in film and digital portraiture. So here we chose 2 of her artwork, the Learning Tree and the Pac-Man, to start our design and iteration on the interaction. For our interaction part, we want our players to lift up their arm and mimic the movement from the artwork. And also we want interaction to be intuitive enough for the player to interact with. For the animation part, the animation must cooperate with our interaction. The tree originally has only 2 parts for the animation. The left arm up and the right arm up, and the tree will be generated. But from our playtests, the player often feels like there's nothing to do anymore after the tree was generated. So we added a little bit more of shaking effect with the arm waving to give the player a false illusion of controlling and escaping, and also make the interactive experience progressive. For the Pac-Man animation, same as the Tree Man, we want our player to use the arm to control the mouse and to eat the human off the tree. And therefore, from the feedback from Renee, it felt weird to let the human disappear directly after being eaten, and there we added a little bit of shaking and flicker to the eating animation. For our Running Man, we started with different Running Man animation tests at the beginning of the semester. We converted the 2D picture into 3D models to add the animation. The bizarre movement and also the distortion of the body matched with Renee's artwork. But to keep Renee's artwork as 2D digital portraiture, we finally decided to still use 2D pictures. There we exported the 2D Photoshop file in Unity to add the skeleton and also the icon controller to experiment with different animation. There we met a problem again that with a single picture, the distortion of the body is too much for a running pose. Here we want to cut off the body parts to make the movement smoother, but the original pose has made this picture, the lightning and shadowing, too strong. So cutting off the body would make the joint looks unconnected. For our final iteration for the animation, we finally decided to only cut off the back leg and trying to make the animation smoother. Next, I will give it to Echo to talk more about our second room.
Thank you, Bella. So I'm going to introduce the explorations and iterations we made for the second projection mapping room. So Renee gave us a video she created, and she wanted to exhibit at Mattress Factory. And our mission is creating an immersive experience based on that. So the most efficient pipeline we figured out was unwrapping the cube-like room as a cross-shaped canvas so that all the content on the walls can be connected together. And Renee's artwork can transfer from one wall to another, both vertically and horizontally. You can see the after effects here. The cross-shaped canvas is where we create all content. And the length-wise ratio is actually exactly the same as the real space, which just makes everything easier because when we crop it into 5 videos and project them on the wall, they can actually fit the size perfectly. So for the content, we were inspired a lot by Renee's artwork, and she gave us her artwork original files with all layers, so we can break them up into independent pieces and use them as our source material. We also analyzed and extracted 6 main ways she used to express the beauty of fractal art, human body, life, growth, and also the voice from goddess. And they are like moving, zooming, rotating, transforming, duplicating, symbolizing, and also a lot of organic combinations of them. Here is our production. So the video is about 7 minutes, and we will keep it looping at the second projection mapping room. So above Renee's ways of expression and concept, what we focused more is actually how to lead guests immerse into the 3D space more and how to echo with our utopia idea. So for this movement, we intended to lead the guests rotate themselves, like watch from the left walls to the right walls, so they can feel they are free in this space. And for this one, we make the content concentrate on the middle wall, facing the guests directly, and make the movement slow, so the guests can have enough time to stare at it and feel it. So for this movement, we took advantage of the connection among all walls, so the image can actually expand to almost like everywhere in the room, so it can create a feeling of being surrounded and being a part of the artwork. For this one, because Renee's artwork has an extremely high resolution, so we kind of zoom it out very much to show the amazing details of the artwork. And we also try to combine two of them together, and we were impressed by the negative space it created naturally in the center. So basically, for the second projection mapping room, the main idea is creating a feeling of security, freedom, and abundance, just like a utopia. So I will pass to Hui and Nelson to talk about the tech challenge we had. Thank you.
Thank you. So since we're connecting all 5 devices together and we're going to cover all 5 walls with no gap, we have to use the short slope projectors. But currently, the Mattress Factory wasn't able to provide us with 5 projectors, so we have to settle with the 1080p ones. But all of our video files are prepared in 4K, so if they were going to upgrade it in the future, they also can have the potential of that. And another issue we have is like connecting 5 projectors to a single PC. Since a normal PC does not have the hardware capability of connecting to 5 external projectors, we have a custom PC built with 2 graphic cards so that they have enough port and horsepower to drive the 5 projectors.
We also met with some Kinect failure cases, like the tracking performance is really depends on the lighting condition. When there's some lights cast some shadow on your body, the skeleton cannot be recognized very well. But it definitely have a better performance than the Kinect 2 in a darker environment. And we also have some detection issue, like Kinect actually will build up a 3D spaces, and according to the Kinect position, so where we're gonna put it is really important, like the position and the height of the Kinect. So after several tests, we finally decided to put it right above the films and in the middle of it, and also tilt it down a little bit. And we also have some optimized with the code to make the Kinect to only detect the closest person to the Kinect, so we only have one person be detected in one Kinect.
So since we're using 2 Kinect in a single Unity file, we have to synchronize it in some way. And that's when we run into a well-known problem in the Kinect development community. So basically, when you synchronize the 2 Kinect, you have to assign one of them as a primary device and the other as a subordinate device. And the way the device remember this assignment is have something to do with the PC switcher of the USB. But the Kinect also have support problem for some of the most common USB drivers out there in the Windows. So we have to reset it very frequently at first. But luckily, after some research, we were able to fix it at the end. But we still provided a document for the Mattress Factory if they run into any trouble while the expansion is running, so they know how to reset it. And we also prepare a document for future students about how to solve this issue. So if they want to develop on the Kinect, they can also do that and use our document as a reference.
We also have some problem when we're trying to run 5 videos at room 2. At first, we are using Unity to multi-display to run 5 videos, and also use it for projection mapping. And also we have some interaction with the Kinect, but we found out that we can only run 3 videos at one GPU at one time. And Unity does not support multi-GPU usage, so we changed from using Unity to use the normal video player like port player to play 5 videos, and use the CMD command to try to make sure it can open up the videos at the same time. And port player actually can give the different rendering text of the different projectors to different GPUs so that we can render the 5 videos into 2 GPUs that we are using.
We've started installing our work at the Mattress Factory this week, and we are hoping to finish installing both the rooms by the end of next week. We'll be happy to have you at the Mattress Factory this Monday from 11 to 1 p.m. to look at our progress. The show will also open in June, and it will run for 6 months. And with that, we want to extend our special thanks to the IT team at ETC for their immense support in procuring all the material, all the tech, and helping us solve all the technical challenges that we had this semester. And we would also like to thank Ricardo, Shirley, and Michael for helping us improve our guest experience the entire way. Thank you very much. This is Team Soul Rounded, and we are now open for any questions.
Okay. Just a question about working as a team to bring the vision of an outside artist, to life in your work. Do you guys have any advice for future teams who may have to do this? Something that worked really well for you guys, in order to bring her vision into the space and not crowd it with your own vision, but actually respect her work. Thank you.
So it's the question like how to work with artists and how to make a balance between the works and of ours and hers. Yeah. So I think one important aspect we've done is that we talk with the artist super frequently. We also have several conversations outside the kind of working times. We met at the coffee shop to talk more about our details of the vision of the world, even not related to the work, but have a better understanding from the artist's perspective and from our perspective. So try to find this kind of balance and understand the artist's wants and understand the project goals. So at the same time, yeah.
Shirley.
This is more of a comment and a question. At Soft, you were having a lot of problem with Connect, and the answer was the client's just going to have to reset. So I appreciate that you did not give up on Connect and found a solution for your client.
Thank you. So we've prepared a proper document which will help the Mattress Factory reset it every time they want. Dave?
I guess, can you speak a little bit more about any playtesting you did and how that informed your sense of how guests will experience this?
Yeah, so for the playtesting, the first time of the kind of playtesting, we find out that people find there's a kind of imbalance between the Tree Man and the Pac-Man. Then we kind of iterate on the Tree Man to make it better, have more fun with that. And also, according to several playtesting, we found that the kind of movements of the original piece, the Tree Man, the bottom of the Tree Man, should be more obvious as a hint for audience to raise their arm. And we also have some iterations on that part. Yeah, and actually the kind of the playtesting helped us a lot, and not only for the first one, but also when we play testing in the second room, the projection mapping room, we find out that if we adding some more elements into that room, adding more equipments, it will be too much. Then we also eliminate some parts of that room. Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's time.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We are Inner Matter. Our team consists of myself, Jillian, Zebo, Lauren, Ferris, and Constanza. So we set out this semester to explore the potential of environmental biofeedback in enhancing VR meditation. To do that, we partnered with EquiHealth, which is an evidence-based mobile meditation app that helps adults dealing with high-stress environments. They have an interest in shifting towards a younger demographic and a really keen interest in biometrics and VR, making them a perfect fit for our project. So we've adapted Equi's Tour of Your Senses introductory meditation session into a VR experience with biofeedback. This meditation session is a strong content foundation for our VR experience because it relieves some of the burden of new meditators requiring pre-knowledge to experience it. So the original session is audio guided, which gave us some good content to work with without limiting us to any particular visuals, again lending itself really well to a VR environment. But most importantly, Equi's lessons are not breath guided, meaning that any changes in the user's breathing rate are reflective of a deeper relaxation state with minimal interference from explicit breathing instructions. So with that, our aim this semester kind of shifted, and we ended up adapting Equi's meditation into a VR environment with biofeedback. And so the biometric that we chose for our biofeedback was breathing. Breathing is a really great choice because it is intrinsically tied with relaxation, so the more relaxed you get, the deeper your breaths are and the longer they take. To measure this, we use the hexoskin provided by EquiHealth, which lets us mark inhale and exhalation events, as well as find the respiration per minute of each user. So to give you guys a bit of what our experience feels like, here's a quick demo.
Now, let's explore C. We'll start by focusing on rest. If they aren't already, gently open your eyes. Runners often use a soft gaze to conserve energy, but you can use it any time to contact more rest. Relax the muscles around your eyes and try to look through the world, but not at anything in particular.
So now that you guys kind of have a little bit of the understanding of how our experience feels, we want to get into some of the user flows so you guys understand the breadth of what we've done. So the user starts by putting on the hexoskin and a VR headset, and then they move into the introduction of our environment with all of our logos and information about the ETC, followed by an instruction session where users learn how to interact with environmental aspects as well as gestures to control the environment and their experience. Afterwards, we get into a brief introduction of Equi's content, focusing on the 3 skills that they'll be working on, as well as the 3 senses that they will be experiencing those skills with. So that's seeing, hearing, and feeling. From there, we put them in this play session, which explicitly says what our biofeedback is in the environment and how users can change that biofeedback. During the play session, users can mess around with their own breathing to see how that affects the environment, helping them acclimate to this new experience. From there, we get into the bulk of Equi's meditation content. So this is 3 chapters focusing on 3 senses of seeing, hearing, and feeling. These chapters have both parts of guided meditation with a verbal guide, as well as parts of silent practice where they can just experience the environment. In between this, there are also check-ins where users can help customize their verbal guidance and feedback based on what's happening and what they're feeling. So as it sums up, we go into a reflection period where users can indicate whether the meditation went well or didn't go well. In addition, they are also given a biometric graph. So this graph is great because it highlights key moments throughout the meditation, as well as gives people their breathing rate throughout the entire experience. So essentially, now that you guys know what we've done, we're moving into some of the insights that we've learned throughout building this. We got these insights from testing within our team and over 35 playtests from external users, focusing on like faculty, staff, and some of our peers, as well as Equa and some other naive guests. And we got this feedback in a variety of ways, including interviews, focus groups, surveys, and observation. And then, in addition to that, we had back-end data that we could use to help determine things. So we were able to see the respiration rate, where users are in different modules, track their head movement to see what they're looking at, and we can like track when the verbal guide is talking or not. And we use all these together to help iterate and discover some of the insights that we found.
So we were able to extract a number of insights from our tests. So related to those of biofeedback, in order for biofeedback to help the user perceive a meditation as effective, we needed to overcome 3 challenges. 1, the user needs to notice visual changes in their environment. 2, they need to be able to associate these with physical changes from inside of their body. And 3, they need to understand how this amounts to progress over the overall course of their experience. So very early on, we were concerned with the question of how do we communicate biofeedback without distracting from the meditation. We had feedback on an initial design, which you can see up here, that it was too visually intrusive. So we corrected it with a number of assumptions. We assumed that subtle, unobtrusive changes, such as the sway of cattails and the glowing of flowers, would be better. But then we found, after testing with our peers, EQUA, and instructors, that users barely tended to notice some of these visual changes. So this led us to our first insight, that there is a balance. Indicators need to not be distracting, but also not so subtle that they become completely unnoticeable. The next challenge is getting the user to associate visual changes with physical changes inside of their body. Since this was a non-breathing meditation, we didn't want the user focusing too much on their breath, but instead, we want to use improvements of breath as a reflection of the overall effectiveness of other techniques. So we asked, how can we use breath to show progress without drawing too much attention to it? Well, we settled on a method of indirect control. The idea is that the slower our user was breathing, the more positively the environment responded, without specifically deconstructing RPM to the player at any specific point in time. So we reflected this in many ways, how much the indicators would glow, the speed and evenness of the swaying cattails, and also the saturation of the overall scene. There were some important values that we had to set for this to work. We decided that at the baseline respiration rate of roughly 16 RPM, being the global average, the environment should be mostly inactive, and that everything should glow when you hit that target of roughly 8 RPM, as this is an ideal goal set from conversations with EQUA. But after testing with our peers, instructors, and consultants, we found a number of other insights. Firstly, that both success and failure need to actually be visible to the user in order for the biofeedback to feel credible, and also that users differ drastically in their breathing capabilities. So a single baseline number just won't work. So we adapted that baseline to be user-specific. We determined people's natural breath rate as the average RPM during the introductory period before the meditation itself begins. In addition to this, we also have this baseline, we set this baseline value to be higher up along the spectrum. We settled on a value of roughly 40% brightness for the baseline breath rate, as this led to better reported responsivity during testing, as users could sort of breathe faster than normal and then see how things start to dim in the environment based on that, giving them a better understanding of the overall spectrum and system as a whole. But we still had one more major problem. Users didn't tend to believe abstractions about the relaxation. They needed direct evidence of what's being measured. When a user tries to control their breath and they don't see an immediate direct connection, they're unlikely to think that the system's working properly. So here are some solutions that we came up to address many of these insights. First of all, we thought that a directly controlled indicator would be perfect. So this is affected directly by your inhale and exhale. This allows confirmation that breath was being recorded and actually affecting the environment, and help the user understand the overall system much better. We also introduced a play session. So in this moment, we explicitly tell the users where all of the indicators are, which helps solve the noticeability problem. In addition, this also lets the users understand changes before giving them the opportunity to practice playing with their own breath to really feel out the entire system's functionality at their own levels of comfort.
Apart from those live biofeedback during the meditation session, our playtesters also find themselves hard to justify the meditation session as effective and expect an overview of how they improved or responded to the entire session. We believe that our biometric data can help solve this problem. Therefore, we designed the biometric graph to visualize our users' biometric data that we collect during the meditation session so that they can see what is happening to their body in a quantitative way. From the graph, people can see their overall breathing rate change on the top panel, and we also highlighted the best moments to emphasize positive changes so that they can get motivated and have a reflection on that moment. And we also have a can improve moment so that they can see potential for future improvement. Both these moments can help our users digest what they do and what they feel during the meditation, and had the motivation to meditate again. After many playtesting, we found that our biometric graph actually helps our users to build confidence in our biofeedback.
So on top of introducing biofeedback into meditation, we also discovered some necessity of creating meditation in the VR context. So the first thing we found in our test is that mobile meditation audio guide is actually long-winded and a little bit overwhelming to focus on in the VR context. We think that's because the VR environment has more stimulations for people to focus on, so they don't have enough mental resources to do that. So the content of guided meditation and the representation of it need to be adapted to be multimodal, and in this case, is visual friendly. So in our iteration, we added label of texts and animation of the interactions for people to see if they are asked to give any feedback to the system. In this way, user won't feel being punished if they're not focusing enough on the audio content or distracted by the environment a little bit. We also did some adaptation on the meditation modules in the Aqua's original script. So because in our user test, we find two patterns. So first one is that user actually need more time to digest the audio content. And also they need more time to get familiar with the environment changes and the general environment. And the second insight is that we find the inward awareness does not translate well into VR. Because when we were asking our user to close their eyes to see in, the major things they will feel is a VR uncomfortableness. So in order to solve that, we removed all the inward awareness modules from the script, and we doubled the silence practice time for them to have more confidence in the environment. And since we talked a little bit about VR uncomfortableness, we also had some changes on the script to deal with that. So in the original text, we didn't mention VR element. And after the iteration, we added some sentences in the feel out part for user to feel the weight of the headset and the texture of rubbers. In this way, we make user feel perceived that they're wearing VR headset and the uncomfortableness with it. And besides that, we also did some tests and find some usability problems from our original system of gesture design. So we designed the gesture to use a stop sign as the stop interaction of the whole environment to be more immersive, but this is actually counterintuitive in our test because users tend to use a conduct sign, which is using a fist to stop the interaction. So we swapped the interaction later. And next, we also discovered that users actually have different preferences on sitting on the floor or sitting on the chair. So it makes the static interface with the orb and the boxes are not suitable for other people to reach. So some people find it hard to reach. So in the next iteration, we make the orientation and the height of the interfaces relative to the user.
Yeah, so with the script cut down, we were able to add more content into the environment to support the script. And a lot of that came from problems we noticed in playtesting. So an example of this is in the vision section, where you're supposed to focus on different objects. We found that people were actually uncomfortable with the lack of guidance in this. So naturally, we created guidance in the form of this dragonfly. And the takeaway for that is that there's different expectations in VR, and it's important to address that. So to conclude our insights, we kind of have a high-level observation, which is that it's difficult to create broad appeal in a single experience. We've done a lot of iterations on even small stuff like the hand color and sky color, but our advice to the next future teams who do work in this space is maybe to consider the potential of customization. There's only so much you can do with a single experience. It might be good to make multiple environments or give customization options for the hand colors, for example. And in support of that, it makes sense to go for a more abstract and simple art style. So speaking of the future, we'll be handing off these items to Equa, a proof of concept prototype, the source code and files, and some documentation. Lastly, we'd like to give some special thanks to all these people who've given us feedback and helped us playtest, as well as Equa throughout the semester. And we're now open for questions. Yes. Yeah.
This is a very interesting project. My question is,
So Equi's content is actually eyes open, so that's not something that we looked a whole bunch at, just because also VR does not really facilitate a closed eyes experience so much, and that was actually one of the reasons why we ended up cutting some of the script, is that it's really, really hard to facilitate, and it wasn't really a major part of Equi's content.
Another question is, do you collect users' data to further improve your design?
So actually, we collected a lot of built-in analytics, especially on the head movement, to see what is the focal point of our users to focus on the environment and what drives their attentions. And also, we find some patterns that when users are hearing sound of the guide, they will probably feel less relaxation because their RR is increasing immediately. So we actually use multiple data from our playtest. We record analysis for each playtesters. So we actually did a lot of iteration on that.
Yes, Ian.
What would you say, coming to the end of this project, what would you say is the thing at the top of your list of ideas you had that you didn't get to?
Oh, okay, so that's a good one. The question was, what was the top, the idea that we didn't get to that we really wanted to integrate? And so I think one that was actually a suggestion from Equa was the idea of integrating some sort of body movements for feel. So an example of that would be closing your fist and having guidance talk about how you can feel that closure, you can feel your fingers and your skin and that kind of stuff to sort of guide a more embodied sense of feeling.
I have one more. I'm curious, why didn't you do a live demo?
Yeah, so the question was, why didn't we do a live demo? It's a 20-minute long experience, and because it's a meditation, it's a relatively slow-paced sort of take it at your own rate. So it was very kind of difficult for us to, we thought that giving an overview of the different subsections rather than having that be a substantial portion of our presentation would have been more valuable.
Yeah, so there are biofeedback VR meditation apps where you do have that immediate breathe in, something changes, but we've kind of designed it to be a lot slower than that.
Thanks, team.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, one of our team members will have to do it remotely due to the travel policy. So he will be presenting through Zoom. And Rick, can you hear us clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Hello.
Okay, video. Check the video. Okay, yeah. Should we duplicate the screen? 'Cause we want to duplicate the screen to that actual monitor. Here, there's nothing there.
Start your slideshow, just see your.
Oh, okay.
Just hit F5.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay. Hello, we're Unwell, and here are our team members. And here are our awesome faculty advisors. And this semester, we've been working on this pitch project, making a 2D, 3D puzzle-solving game in which the player playing as the 3D character Jingshen to help the 2D character Wenchen to go back home together. The art and narratives are inspired by real history events, and we want the content to be more approachable to a wider audience. The final deliverable is a playable vertical slides built with Unreal Engine 4 as a proof of concept. And here are the two characters that we've been introduced a lot. They're two remarkable princes who married to a foreign land with massive contributions. However, in their lifetime, they never got the chance to go back home again. And that inspiration gave us the idea to set up the story of our game to give them a chance to go back home together by helping each other. And as many of you have noticed, the story that we're delivering today is very different from what we pitched the last semester, and there's many reasons behind it. Over the semester, we're trying to overcome these difficulties. We're trying to tell a story that involves the character and cultures from a very complicated background while keeping it at low cost. And we're also trying to create characters that the audience can relate to and understand their motivations, even though they're from a very complicated cultural background. So first, we created a really long script having a really complicated story, and then we realized the script just requires a lot of effort in order to tell the story very clearly. And the worst part is, our team doesn't have a narrative designer. So we made these changes in order to fulfill the goal of this project. Instead of telling a story without a very complicated cultural background that requires the knowledge from the audience, we want the story to focus more on a more universal topic that everyone can relate to. In our case, it's going back home. And instead of making the game very narrative-oriented, we want the game to be more gameplay-oriented because that's what we're good at. And last but not the least, we want to use the history and the culture as an artistic guidance instead of telling them as accurate as possible. And now I will pass it to Ray to talk more about the design.
Thanks, Claire. And to first talk about the design, I would like to invite you to enjoy this video that includes our gameplays. Thanks for watching. All right, so after the half presentation, we added a new core mechanic and we called it the day-night change over here. As you can see that in the mural, we added the moon and the sun, and those are actually serving as the buttons can be triggered by the 2D character passing by. And they will also magically change the environment of the 3D to days and night. And also there will be elevators that is connected to these buttons, rise and falls with the same emissive color. And it will create a variation of the 3D environments, and we hope it's adding more challenge to the 3D movements. So the player will need to make the use of these platforms to move the 3D character to the right position to make the right call so they can solve the puzzle. And next, I want to talk about the cute little features that we added to help the players better understand the mechanics with the minimized amount of explanation required. So the first is this platform indicator. So as you can see in the lower two pictures, that when the camera is shifted to the side perspective, there is an emissive line that is added to the top of the platforms to tell you whether the rows are connected or not. So because in our playtest, we noticed that even though we tell the playtesters that the mechanic is on the side perspective, they can ignore the reality and have these rows connected as the side scrollers, but still the vision is not giving them enough confidence to do so. But with this blue line, it's very clear that rows are workable or not now. And the next is the emissive wall. So as you can see that once the player is getting close enough to a mirror, the mirror will lighten up at the top and the bottom of it. So the players won't waste a lot of time wandering around in front of the mirror to make sure how close they should be at the wall or how accurate they should face that wall. They just need to find whichever the wall is lit up, that wall is ready to be caught. And also, there is a wild goose is drawn on the wall because that is a signal we added for the player's input. Sometimes the 2D character will not moving, responding to the player's input because it's blocked by some barrier, but the signals are always required to give them the feedback. So we choose to let the 3D character drawing the wild goose on the mural as this feedback of the input. And the reason why we choose the wild goose is because the wild goose is actually the nickname of the 2D princess Wenchen. And we're making a metaphor here as the Wenchen is always following the lead of a wild goose that is in the direction of a destination. So that's why the 2D character will always go to where the wild goose is drawn in the mural. And next, I will hand it to Josh to talk about the level design.
Thanks, Ray. So what you see here are the 4 tutorial early levels in our game we added after HAPS. So as you can see in the level 1-1, we have a relatively open space, and there's no camera movement. We basically allow the player at this moment to use their controller freely move in their space. This is to familiarize them with the basic movement mechanics of our game. In level 1-2, we lock the camera into a side-scroller perspective. This has 2 reasons. First, we want them to focus on the mural at the background, because mural is a very essential part of our game. Secondly, we want to foreshadow what is coming up, because we have a side camera perspective later in the game. And in level 1-3 and 1-4, we think is prime time to teach the player that they can shift the cameras, and the shifting camera is very essential to solving puzzles. So as you can see in level 1-3, they can shift the camera to the left to traverse over the gap. And when they traverse over the gap, the camera is in a way so that the mural in the frame, the mural is framed in a way is front and center on the screen so that they can focus on the content. And the same thing happens similarly in level 1-4. And lastly, we want to talk about the color palette of our games. So early in the level, we kind of have a very cold, kind of bluish color palette. And then as they go deeper into the game, the color palette shifts to something warmer and more hopeful. This is to visually convey to them a sense of progression. And next, let's talk about tech.
Thank you, Josh. So, as you remembered, our designer have many crazy little ideas, and it's our tech team's responsibility to make them possible. So, here's some of the building blocks that we have. The one thing that we have is the 2D princess, and she needs to be able to walk across the mural. She not only needs to do this in the normal perspective, she also needs to do this in the side view. When you're in the side view, part of the wall folds, and you ignore it entirely. We do this. This is possible through traversal splines. These are the splines that we specify connectivity relationships, and the relationship can be changed based on the perspective that you are currently in. Another feature that we have is the 3D princess, who can also ignore gaps on the road when going in the side views. Take a look at this example. You're on the left, and you want to go to the right. But you can't do that normally because there isn't a way in between. However, if you switch to the side view, this becomes possible because the road is connected. When that happens, we secretly turn on a hidden platform for you. We teleport you on top of the platform, and you start to move along the green line. In the game view, it looks like you are in the original spot, but physically, you are now colliding with a platform, so it's possible to cross gaps entirely. And with the new feature added, we also use some 3D magics to create time-specific lighting and tone mapping and height fogs, which gives our art team a lot of creative freedom. And speaking of art, Claire is going to talk about the art.
Thank you, Shuxin. So for the character creation, we created this character sheet in the very beginning of the semester, listed all the personalities that we think our Princess Jinchun could have, and use it as a guidance to reply to. When we designed the character, we also did some research online about the clothes back to Tang Dynasty, so the character actually looks like she's living in the time. Here's the concept art we created based on the character sheet, and here's the final render of this character. For the pipeline, we used ZBrush, Maya, and Substance Painter, and Marvelous Designer to create this class simulation. And for the rigging and animation, we created the body rig in Maya, combining with the class simulation in Unreal Engine 4. And here's how it looks like in Maya without the class simulation, and how it looks like in the engine eventually. And now I will pass it to Ariana to talk about the environment.
Next, I'm happy to introduce the creation of the 3D environment.
So during the research phase, we've studied some games that have similar layouts as well as the original Tibetan interior and art. So these are the phrases that we describe our environmental art style: crimson tranquility and dreamlike. So the perspective shifting mechanic is a challenge for environment design. We need to make sure that not only the environment looks good from the one diametric perspective as well as two flat views, but also the environment enhances players' experience of mirror puzzle solving. Plus, the environment assets can be used repeatedly for future level designs. So these are the methods that design into the environment pipeline. First, we make all the architectural pieces as modular assets and with unified shapes. Second, we make a pattern library and utilize trim sheets as much as possible. And third, use framing and proper contrast to guide players' sight to the mirror. So to push the environment a little bit further, here comes a stage which I call adding a breath of life. Where is this palace, and how are the murals magical? I can answer them by adding those elements in the environment. The palace is in a dreamland with spiritual flowers that originate from the Himalayan terrain. The murals are portals that connect the two worlds as the wind-blown sand and leaves travel from the painting to the room. And that is the completion of the 3D environment. And next, Shirley will talk about the 2D mural, and her part will be delivered by the audio.
Hello, here are some reference images of the real Tibetan murals. In the mural development process, I have collected many references from photos in real life and subtracted the geometric features from each region and transferred them to the paintings. When designing the visual art, I have used references from actual mural paintings in China that depicted the historical figures in the story to ensure they have the correct clothing that match the time.
Thanks, Shirley. And next, Tian will talk about sound design.
Thank you, Ariana. So for sound design, as briefly mentioned during the hubs, the execution of sound effects was waiting in the line for many other scenes to be finished. So the principle was to use minimum asset to create maximum effect. And to achieve that, the first thing we need is the voice audio middleware. This allows me as a sound designer and also Rhea and Shuxing as programmers to easily manipulate the sound effects and control how they are played. Another important function is the animation synchronization that I have tested before the hubs and eventually implemented for our final working animation. So besides the normal sound effects we see in most games that's for gameplay purpose, we have some special sound effects that's for narrative purpose. This including the opening murmuring sound that indicate to the players that our main character is falling into a dream from the stress she was facing daily, and also the wild goose call sound effects that tells the player why the 2D character is following the goose. We have shown the first soundtrack before the hubs. However, as the game progresses, the two princesses went to a new environment with new art style and color palette. Thus, the music should also evolve. According to the story, they were at the Danxia landform, which is pretty similar to desert, and the location was Shanxi, the middle part of China. So we wrote a second soundtrack using some signature instruments that both represent the desert feeling and also the local culture. Near the end of the production, we came up with the idea of using music change to give players more positive feedback. To achieve that, we used the voice function of state detection and taking out and putting back several instruments from the second soundtrack when the player reaches a certain checkpoint. We want to use this to give players more confidence that they are going in the right direction. So with that being said, this is the end of our presentation, and we're now open to questions. Thank you.
Lovely use of materials and lighting to help guide the game design. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and the process to achieve that.
So is the question about how we use the materials to facilitate game design?
Yeah, the lighting and the material usage, like you have full
Yes, so for the gold materials and all the emissive lights, we're trying to kind of use them to indicate, which way that players need to go to, and what is the next step. And we also the whole team doesn't like the idea of putting too much UI on the screen, so we're trying to implement all the UI elements, like the hints, into the environment and also onto the mural. So that kind of doesn't break players' experience in the world, will also give players a good amount of hints.
Yeah.
You have both 2D and 3D in your game design. I'm new to this. Can you explain more about this? What's the challenges between 2D and the interaction between the two? And what's the advantage? How you make use of this?
Okay. Yeah. So the question is what's the difficulty of design a game that involving both 2D and 3D, and what's the advantage of that? Ray, do you want to take that or?
Sorry, I cannot hear very clearly about the question. Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, so the question was, what's the difficulty and the advantage also that we use a game design that's involving both 2D and 3D?
Oh, so is the question about what's the difficulty of designing the puzzles with both 2D and 3D?
Yeah, and also the advantage.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to connect the 2D and the 3D together. I mean, the both elements. That was one of the difficulty I was facing, because at the early concept, it was majorly about the puzzles in the mural, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how to add more challenge to the 3D part. So later, the solution, of course, is the day and night change, and that will be adding more interesting things to the 3D characters' movements. And it's kind of hard to say how do we solve it. It's more like everyone is contributing a lot of interesting ideas. But yeah, that was a difficult thing.
And to add on that a little bit, so in a very early stage of this game production, we were facing a difficulty that people feel there's the puzzles weight in the 2D world is way more than the puzzles in the 3D world. And we were facing a situation when we are doubting whether we need the 3D character or not. So to solve that, we adding kind of a collaboration kind of system that the 2D character in the mirror will also influence the world in the 3D. So that just added another layer to the 3D world that the puzzles are actually collaborating with each other. And having the 2D and the 3D definitely add more potentials to the puzzle design and the level design, yes.
And also early on, we kind of wanted to stick with the traditional kind of over-the-shoulder perspective 3D adventure game camera, but then that didn't work, because if you still want to include a huge mural and then have the player to look at it, that is usually an environment asset. It's not integrated into part of the game. So we pivoted to something like what you see here. It's the kind of more diametric, isometric camera that you can see both the 3D character and the mural, and then they both kind of work together, and you can interact with it. So in terms of gameplay, we kind of pivoted for that system.